Hey everybody, this is your host Yoshino, and you're listening to another exciting episode of Artists Decoded. In this episode, I had the pleasure to speak with author, speaker, nonprofit organizer, and anthropologist Sophia Rokhlin. Sophia is a program coordinator at the Chaikuni Institute in Peru and currently directs the Sustainable Ayahuasca Cultivation Program at the Temple of the Way of Light. She is a co-author of When Plants Dream, and her research has also been featured in publications including the New York Times and the BBC. In this episode, we speak about the concept of reciprocity, traditional and modern uses of ayahuasca, and the loss of ritual within the Western world. I really enjoyed the exploratory nature of this conversation with Sophia. We were able to cross-pollinate certain ideologies around the arts and science and where they intermingle and cohabitate. And I had a really great conversation with her, so hope you enjoy it. Before we begin this episode, please go to our iTunes page, leave that review. It'll help for viewers just like yourself to hear about this podcast. So here it is, without further ado, my conversation with anthropologist and author Sophia Rokhlin. Hope you enjoy it. Given the knowledge you've acquired through your experiences with ayahuasca and the work you've done with indigenous tribes such as the Shipibo Canibo in Peru, and your experiences living within Western cultural structures, how did these experiences inform you on your own purpose in this life? And what have all these amalgamated experiences shown you?
How much time do you have?
We got as much time as we need. I just want to go straight for the center. Let's go straight for the center.
Great. Let's center will hold. Okay. Well, where do I don't know how to bite into this burger. Let's see. So I guess you asked if maybe I'll just rehash. I sort of understood your question a bit. How did my path, my path has unfolded as I've been walking on it, I didn't just randomly end up in the rainforest in a way. It's I've been following my heart, my intuition and my interests throughout the years, since I was 18, 19 years old. And really, the second that I was able to leave the house and started college and started exploring things on my own, I naturally found myself gravitating towards really looking at how different human communities understand, honestly, what it is to be human and what it is to be in relationship with their environments and the different elements and plants and animals and all these things. And I'd probably say that impulse and that draw, that interest came from a place of emptiness in myself. I grew up in New York City and I'm a child of immigrants and I'm an only child. So I feel like I've always been looking for community and, I want to say a existential or cosmic compass, right? For some reason, just the cut and dry trajectory of going to university and getting this degree and working in finance or media or whatever it is that would have been the predictable path for me just wasn't, something wasn't right about it. Something didn't feel right about it. So with that, I basically just found myself throwing myself into whatever situations possible that would bring me closer to working with usually elders of indigenous traditions around the world with a specific focus on people from the Amazon rainforest. Because, the Amazon is the most biodiverse place on Earth, the most biodiverse terrestrial ecosystem. We find more plants and animals in the Amazon in 1 hectare of the Amazon than we do in all of the whole North American continent. It's like almost unfathomably diverse and beautiful. And so people living in these environments have obviously been shaped by them, the way that they perceive of time and space, the way that they craft rituals, the way that they architect relationships, laws, and so on. And so you really see that in Amazonian communities. You really see how the elements shape their worlds, the way that they see things.
Yeah. Something that's really interesting about the Shipibo specifically is how they construct this idea of how the universe was created through sound. And I was just thinking about that in terms of what we think of in terms of wavelengths and how we associate frequencies and energies together, and on the sense of how you connect with people. And I'm curious how, just being a part of that culture, what sort of things have you observed that connects them to each other and also with nature and their surroundings, and maybe something that's been lost within Western cultures?
What a good question. Well, okay, so I'll start by saying, and I think it's important to say this, that I identify as like an anthropologist, somebody that studies people and studies cultures. And this is also like historically a very fraught discipline. It's a colonialist discipline. It's been problematic in many ways. And so whatever I say is coming from my own personal interpretations and experiences. And I hope that I wouldn't be, trying to like explain how other people do it, So, but again, just like seated from where I am and my own perspectives, and in this liminal space between myself and these communities, what I've experienced and what at least to me has been intriguing and unlike, what I learned within my Western sauce, like our kind of American, North American culture, is the concept of reciprocity, which I don't know if it's become a buzzword yet. Maybe it has. I hope it is. But in any case, yeah, there's like this concept of very simply understanding that everything is interconnected. This is not merely like, a hippy dippy woo concept, but ecologists and all sorts of folks working in scientific disciplines will tell you that everything is connected. And so really understanding that these communities are keenly aware of the impact of their actions and their thoughts and the way that they use their words in many cases, and sowing, the seeds of the future as they live in the present, which is a stark, I want to say diversion or contrast to the way that our entire, for example, global commodity market and economic framework is designed, right? It's like immediate return on investments and personal gratification and that kind of go-getter. I'm sure there are a bunch of expressions to explain it, like dog eat dog kind of almost aggressive, violent approach to success. And so that is probably the main fundamental underlying difference, I would say, between the culture that I was raised in and the cultures that I interact with today. And I do see that, we're talking during the time of coronavirus. I hope that in some ways this virus has kind of opened our eyes to the magnificent and dramatic effect just little, viral entities can have upon our larger structures, and maybe even wake us up to the nuanced interconnectedness of everything. Like, we're not alone, we're constantly in conversation with the world around us. So yeah, there are different cultures, the Quechua people, are traditionally from the Andes Mountains, the largest mountain region of South America. Really gorgeous, very special place. Some people say they're like the descendants of the Incas, but in any case, Quechua is the most spoken indigenous language in that continent. And so the Quechua have a concept they call Ayni, Ayni. And again, from my own experience and interpretation, it most closely translates to interconnectedness, reciprocity, mutual aid, and working together. So this is a concept, but it's also like a practice. Or in academic jargon, like a praxis, of philosophy and a practical action. And so let's say to go on this tip, like the praxis of Aini, it physically manifests in the ways that people manage land and divide and allocate labor and resources. So, let's say you are living in this super harsh mountainous environment. It's very cold, and you really only have a few opportunities a year to, let's say, like build structures, right? It doesn't work to do things alone. Like, you could go ahead and build your own house, you could build your own kitchen, you could take care of your own animals, but communities quickly found out that, everything is much more effective when they work together in teams. There's like an African proverb, I'm sure you've heard it before. If you want to go far, go together. If you want to go, how does it go? Because if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it's this kind of similar concept. So again, yeah. that's the gist of it. Yeah.
No, it's really interesting that you bring that up because I recently brought on this social evolutionary psychologist onto the podcast, and we were talking about that, and I was just thinking about how the interweaving of communities and structures, and how I think there's a very much an individualistic thing when it comes to Western cultures, and like you said before, like this dog eat dog world approach, and which is strictly bedded within capitalistic societies. I mean, there's that saying that if capitalism were a person, it'd be a sociopath.
I have someone in mind.
Exactly. Right. I'm sure we all have one person with some sort of coif in his hair.
Yeah, right. The captain of the ship, as it were.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's going down.
Right. Exactly.
Unfortunately. But I mean, I guess the reason why I bring that up is because do you think, just from your observation, I know that you made that essentially a disclaimer that a lot of times from our Western perspective we romanticize these indigenous cultures because they're so much different from our perspective, but I think the reason for that is because we see how these cultures reciprocate and integrate within each other and work together as a collective unit, as opposed to that dog eat dog mentality that we see in capitalistic societies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there is a lot of validity with those observations. And something that I'm curious about is what exactly can be learned in order for, because there's a lot of books out there about happiness and not being happy, and how technology is taking over your mind, and those particular thoughts, these sort of innovations, like technological innovations that we have that are making us unhappy. And what have you observed within the Shipibo, for instance, that is much different than Western culture, and what do you think keeps them happy?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't even know how you could quantify differences. You're in a different place. It's different. Let's see. I mean, Something that I'm particularly interested in is how different cultures interpret health and illness. And I think that working with, a number of indigenous communities, not only the Shipibo, Konibo, or, the Achwar, the Ashaninka, or Kofan. I mean, there are, number of communities there who have entirely different concepts of what health and wellness mean. So comparatively, very simply, in the West, we tend to approach health from an allopathic approach. So we say we're going to fix the issue after it's emerged, right? We're not too hot or keen on preventative medicine. And moreover, you see really Western medicine focusing on things entirely as they manifest physiologically, right? If you have a cancer, it is in this place, it is this thing, and that is the end of the story. No Western, I mean, maybe you have a different idea, but I can't imagine any, well decorated, celebrated Western surgeon saying you got cancer because you're angry, right? Or something like that. And of course,
Yeah.
that's where we start to, perhaps we're shading into the territory of woo here. Like sometimes the other day I got a bug bite on my hand and I had some friends be like, what does it mean? And we look into it. So, but when you start working with communities, like especially, again, I've been working with the Shipibo for about 3 years, specifically within the concept of ayahuasca retreats and botanical healing. So I do feel like I've got an interesting perspective on it. Communities are really understanding health and wellness as relational. So, for example, if you have physical manifestations like weakness or chills or headaches or coughs or these sorts of things, infertility, they could be very closely related to susto, like it means fear. It could be a fear that you caught from some entity in the woods, right? It could be a cold rock that you sat on. They always say like never sit on cold things. So again, this is not unique to the Shipibo. I think that traditional cultures around the world have always understood our health and wellness to be closely related to our environments. And we in the West tend to completely ignore the environmental factors that shape the way that we live and our vitality and also the way we die. So in terms of happiness, I mean, I think it's very simple. Communities just understand that, like drinking a green juice and exercising, they will tend to their gardens and exercise the animals, for example. Like it's not a hyper localized or individualized thing, but communities understand that I'm not going to be healthy until my larger community is healthy, until my relations are healthy, until my land is healthy, until my water is healthy, and so on. And for whatever reason, even as intuitive as that is, that concept is entirely absent from Western institutions and policies, and that needs to change.
Completely.
It's absurd. It's like, and yeah, you have to ask how we got here, and what we can do to reclaim that truth. Really, I've always found it very interesting that there are different, for example, organizations and political factors influencing environment and health. Like they're separate, right? But if you were to go to other communities, other traditional, cultures, it would be absurd to separate those two.
Yeah, I mean, just from hearing you speaking, it just makes me think that, maybe reasons why a lot of Westerners romanticize these indigenous cultures is because that we've lost overall a sort of interconnectedness with ourselves. And if we're not in touch with ourselves, and you can't be in touch with other people on on a more honest, interconnected level. And I feel like because of those things, people turn to substances such as ayahuasca to explore that, to find this area of, or to break down their traumas, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just a medium for exploration, so I'm not trying to villainize the use of like ayahuasca or psychedelics or anything, but I also think that sometimes people kind of lose the intention, or they don't even know the intention of why they want to do that particular thing, to go in deeper, so
Totally. I mean, and I also think too, like in my time working with and studying ayahuasca and the kind of traditional and modern uses of it, I understand it as a substance and a culture, right? So when people are saying like, I'm going to a ceremony or so on, like, remember that it's not only the substance that they may be chasing, but it's also a context. Like, okay, I'm going to sit with a group of people and create ritually a space out of time to reflect on my life, to pray for my life, to be with my pain and my sadness, to communicate with things that are not present to me in the speed and pace of my daily life. And maybe a substance facilitates that sort of presence, maybe it doesn't, but there seems to be something not only about the substance, but the ceremony and the container, the possibility of that, and really the ritual that allows for that kind of transformation. So I'm totally with you. I think, I mean, call me orthodox, but I'm pretty, yeah, I'm against using certain substances without, out of a reverential context. I think that the technology of these substances lies in the creation of rituals. And I think that we've lost that in our society. It's another thing we've lost. And I think with that, we lost the opportunity to celebrate life, to reflect on life, to pray for life, and to really honestly just be present with life. And we can be present in life in meditation, in the morning, in the evenings, in whatever way that we do it. But there's something very beautiful about meditating in community and having the spaciousness and context to share that with people, because we are social creatures. So ritual is an opportunity for us to meditate as groups and share our insights together. So it's like the next level, perhaps. But if you think about it, I mean, all of our cultural ceremonies have been cannibalized by capitalism. Like weddings are ridiculous. Valentine's Day is ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's all these things are just like ridiculous, But silver lining, I mean, I think all of these things do have eternal power, right? Like the power of marriage uniting two lives together is amazing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. And I think that, goes back down to the intention too. I mean, I feel that the reason for divorce rates being so high, and I don't have, the exact figures, and the data on me right now.
They're intense though.
Exactly. And from an observational perspective, I mean, I feel that the reason for that could be partially due to people not really understanding why they want to get married, or not understanding the partner that they've chosen. Well, first of all, I guess if that is the right person for them, or if they're honest with themselves, because it, comes at first from the inner working of the mind and an understanding of yourself. And then from there, then I feel that everything else should fall in order and fall into place with that, And if you don't understand the inner workings of your own mind, then how are you supposed to, first of all, communicate that to other people, and then also outwardly find a partner for that in this marriage context, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
so I think a lot of times in, you can use mainstream films for an example, but we grow up with this romanticization. I mean, you can romanticize anything. And marriage, for instance, it, I think, has lost its ritual because people are more so in Western culture. What I've observed is they're more so worried about what that looks like, the expensive wedding, the this and that. And obviously, I'm making a generalization. This is not for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that speaks so truly about us losing our connection with who we are as individuals, which is why I think we try to utilize these tools such as ayahuasca or any other psychedelic, or I mean, anything could really be a tool. A book could be a tool, something that you learn from Taoism or philosophy. But tools only help to an extent if the knowledge doesn't seep in and turn into wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Right. Yeah. And like, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's like we are living in a world full of tools and techniques and this and that. But do you have the context and, let's say, the community to actually integrate those teachings? And I think, yeah, especially in like the smorgasbord of meditation and mindfulness and psychedelics and wellness and all of this different kind of stuff, it's like, unfortunately, the nature of, honestly, capitalism is just to just endlessly create new products, and to compete in an ever increasingly competitive environment. And so, like, how is it possible that we can just stick with one thing and go deep? So because we're so busy just bopping from thing to thing, at least speaking for myself personally, I found myself very, very I'm like kind of really low jack in all trades and master of none, right? Like you can,
well, mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, no, go on. Sorry.
Well, I guess that's just, I mean, yeah, you said something interesting to me, just how, understanding how do we create the contexts really to support the sinking in, yeah, like the deep integration and wisdom of these practices. There's you ever see the show The OA?
No, I haven't, but I've heard really good things about it.
Oh my gosh, you have
Okay.
to. There's like so much information in that show. Britt Marling is a hero of mine. So anyway, yeah, you gotta watch it. So anyway, there's a quote in season 1 that goes, "Knowledge is only real until it lives in the body."
Mm.
And I really like that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And it was interesting that you brought that up because you were talking about that specific idea with Michael Phillip, and
yeah,
you were talking about that, and then you're also talking about, I think I have it right here actually.
Should we play it back?
yeah. Insert.
Just
quote
do some
now.
meta.
Yeah. Let me just edit it right now into the Zencaster.
Perfect. I love it.
Yeah. No, you're talking about. So I actually, okay. So I had this question based off of that interview. So when did you realize that it's a mission of yours to bridge the gap between indigenous knowledge and Western scientific frameworks?
Oh, cool. When did I mean, I don't think it was ever so much like a mission as just something that I naturally did. And as I naturally did that, as I naturally researched it, studied it, specifically as I spoke publicly about it, writing my book and going on tour about it, I found that any sort of information that seemed to like bridge, one world to another was most well received. Actually, people were like, wow, I never thought of it that way. I never understood it that way. And to me, I found that to be the most gratifying, like contribution to, I don't know, any conversation. Like you forgive me if I've said this before, if you've heard it before, but for example, with how we use certain plants, one of the examples I like to give is about tobacco. So in shamanic cultures in North and South America, tobacco is a sacred plant. There are two different varieties of tobacco that are typically used. So in the Amazon rainforest, it's a bit of a stronger variety. There's more nicotine alkaloids in it. And it's very often planted around houses in communities like that, have sort of folk and magical and shamanic practices. And one time I asked some people, why do you plant tobacco around your house? They say it just like protects us from evil and negative spirits and energies. And then let's say like as an amateur ethnobotanist and somebody who's interested in plant science and chemistry, I know that also tobacco is a pesticide. It's an insecticide. The nicotine alkaloids kill small, invisible entities or creatures, right? So, like, if I want to go a step further and create that third way of perception, bridging that knowledge, we could say, like, what's the difference between, like a parasite or a small insect or a little fly and a little spirit? And maybe the practical and visible manifestations of these things somehow, to the trained eye, have some sort of a non-visible influence. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. No, I'm just listening. Yeah. So, I mean, speaking of bridging the gap, something that I've been thinking about a lot is just this word confluence and finding the confluence between where art at its truest sense, because art is really an expression, but as we've been speaking about, capitalism and the commodification of people's artworks and those sort of things. I mean, I've been thinking about just how something, such as what you do, you're taking your observations and your scientific knowledge and data and being able to find that bridge to be able to make sense out of life, essentially, and that's very much to me what I believe a true artist does, whether that is in a painting or whether that's in a film. And I think that, when there's certain films that hit on that soul level, not just from box office numbers and monetary gain, but when people feel something from that, that is actual true art, because they see something about something is pointed towards our own humanity, and so I don't think that's really a question.
I love
but
that.
I've been thinking about this idea of confluence and yeah, I mean that's why I wanted to bring you on the podcast too, is because just from understanding the trajectory of your career, you feel, or your life path, career, whatever you want to call it, it feels very much like an intuitive approach. Just listening to you talk, you're very intentional with like the words that you say and a sensitivity towards indigenous cultures. And I know, like, from the Western perspective, we romanticize these cultures just because they're so different from ours.
Right.
But I guess that's not a question either, but I'm just pointing something out.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a questionless territory. It's we're in the realm of exploration now.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting. I'd love hearing that, just because, I don't, I guess you focus on art, you question art, and I've never really thought of my life so much as like a work of art, but I guess, by your definitions, I think it kind of is. It's, it's like I mean, I'm a seeker. I've always been a seeker. I'm on a quest to understand deeply, like, what it is to be human. And I think there's nothing new about that. But what is new is living in an international world and the tools that we have. And
But I think that's the interesting thing of being able to build this knowledge and to find the confluence of all of those things and the amalgamation of all these experiences, your experiences that no one else can necessarily have except for you. And I think the more that people listen to that, and and there's examples of, such as like Bruce Lee, for instance. I think there's so many reasons why people can follow him, even though he's not, he was a cultural icon, he was a martial arts icon, and a philosopher in his own right. Although I know some of those philosophies are borrowed from other philosophers, but I think the point is that when people try to bridge the gap, find the confluence, and mold all of these experiences into one, hopefully that is translated to people in a way that is palatable and understandable. But I think that is the thing of being an explorer and trying to make sense out of this vastly complex, strange, socio-political life that we have, So,
Yeah. And it's like, ultimately there's nothing new under the sun. We're just kind of remixing endlessly, but everybody's remix is unique, Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But don't you think that's where true creativity comes from, is through those various remixes?
Probably. Yeah. Right. Like we each have the elements and it's just about how we arrange them. Totally. Yeah. And some people intentionally arrange them and some people don't. Right. Yeah. So maybe it's like the intentional arrangement. And actually, there's one definition of music I really like. It's like the intentional organization of sound. So, maybe like the intentional organization of acts of love or acts of kindness or activism or something.
Did you think that speaks very true to your process?
Totally. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
How do you think you found that sensitivity within yourself to be honest with yourself like that?
I wish I could say it was like I just feel like I had no other option. Like the concept of doing anything that I didn't deeply feel aligned with is like death. The concept of just taking any old job to make money and survive. Like I'd rather, I don't know, I'd just rather do anything else. I cannot settle for something that isn't aligned with my passion for life and beauty and people doing amazing and cool things to make this world a better place. Like I just won't have it. And I'll also say that that's obviously an opportunity for someone who is privileged. Like, well, that, yes. And also I do see people who don't come, I don't come from like, great affluence or anything, but I am a white woman that is born and raised in New York City. So that alone affords me like some leverage that many people don't have to live my life creatively. But even still, I know what you get what I'm saying. I guess I just needed that's like mandatory disclaimer to put in there, and also recognizing that I think that there's just something in me that's like a moth to the flame. Like when I see a flame, when I see some ancient tradition or wisdom or way of doing things or spells and incantations and gestures and ways of taking care of plants and all of these different things that to me just make me feel at home on earth, then that's where I'll go. And my commitment in this life, since the first time I went to the Amazon, since I was 18, was to work until really the day I die to support people in living a good life on their land, supporting indigenous peoples in maintaining their ancestral territories in ways. and using my skills and my incarnation in this life to learn, whatever I need to learn, whether it's politics or economics or law, or some combination of those three, to support them in continuing their ways. Because I've personally gained so much nourishment for my soul, to be totally honest. Like, I'm not, it's romantic, but it is what it is. It feels like, like drinking from a well of knowledge just in a desert sometimes, when you get to interact with, the traditional cultures. And I'll do anything to make sure that the generations that come, after me can also have that opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're a kind, empathetic person from what I've gathered from our discussions, and
so far so good.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's like, I understand where like the disclaimer would come, but I think there's also a lot of validity in understanding the structures, such as like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and being able to come from the background that you came from, to be able to have certain freedoms to allow yourself to think in these more deep ways that doesn't necessarily always translate just because you grew up in New York and all of those things. So it's not necessarily because of birth sort of rights, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I think that there's just like a really honest approach at what you do. And I guess, I was just really interested to bring you on because I've just been thinking a lot about technology. And for instance, like I was saying, I brought on that social evolutionary psychologist, in his book. It's called The Social Leap. His name is William von Hippel. And he talks a lot about how there's been social innovations and technological innovations. And he uses something such as a suitcase as an example. In pre-1970s, the suitcase didn't have wheels. So the social innovation was you would call a friend to bring you to the airport to help you carry the suitcase. And I think since then, and for many social, computer innovations and other sort of technological innovations that we've had, I think there's so many things that inundate us now that, it's like how do you almost like deprogram some of that modern knowledge and some of the modern access? How do you use it as a tool as opposed to letting it just inundate you completely? And I think that's, I've definitely resonate with what you're saying. I think I've often thought about this concept of like, what is a tool and what is a technology, very fundamentally, like what were the first tools that humans used and why? And I mean, at its root, it's basically like an object or technology that is an intermediary between you and some other thing that acts to like facilitate the functionality of something. So in other words, just something that makes things easier. Or, in the case of like instruments and things, I guess it just makes things possible. But let's say with like tech, right? Tech right now is obsessed with this concept of problem solving, like your wheels on the on the suitcase, or the digital payments paradigm, or whatever. You could think of a million sensor automated hand dryers and faucets and all these things, or whatever. Like like the reason why we make tech and the reason why people invest in these things is just make things easier. And somewhere along the way, we had this idea that just life needed to get easier, because it's true. Like, it must have been really, really freaking tough back then, whenever then was. Like, it's nature. Living embedded in wild environments must have been, I don't even know. But today, our obsession with making everything easy, we need to ask what the cost of that is, and asking, maybe there is something beautiful about difficulty and inefficiency, and maybe, as like the cliche parable goes, like, it's not so much about
the destination as it is the actual journey to get there. Right. Like I remember a friend of mine was talking to me about a project they were doing, developing wells, like clean drinking water facilities. I think it was in Guatemala. And they were saying to me, like, you know, we had this great idea to put wells closer to people's life where they lived, because they were just going to the river and they had to walk for 4.5 hours like each day or something insane like that to get the water. So they built the wells and so on, but eventually they had a conversation, like a town hall about it. And it turns out that actually in that walk from point A to point B, from the town to the river, was actually a place where adolescents would like hang out and get to know each other and fall in love and like make out and all these things. And so in that innovation, they like innovated out this extremely important dynamic that would happen between people. Like they could no longer go on romantic silent walks down to the river anymore. So even though it's viewed technically from an outsider's perspective as an inefficiency, there's actually nuance and actually like critical information in that. So I mean, you could think of a million different examples of how we get ahead of ourselves in technology development and problem solving. You know?
Yeah. No, definitely. And I was wondering, like, how do you oscillate between understanding the past, living in the present, and being aware of what you would like to do or your goals for the future?
I pray a lot. And some people call it meditation. I call it prayer. I guess, you know, it's just like maybe I'm watering my plant and I'll be like, you know, blessings to you, plant, or pouring myself a bowl of cereal, like bless the cereal and good, thank you to all the people that helped make it happen. And, you know, massaging kale. May this kale nourish me and support me in being the best person I can be. Like these little incantations and like spells and prayers. And in doing that, you can actually connect to yourself, like in the past when you've done that before. So I could be like, oh, like, you know, I said this, I blessed my kale. It sounds ridiculous, but like I blessed this kale yesterday in the same way. And then looking at where my mind was then, where my attention was then. And if I bless the kale tomorrow, like I'll have a different thing. So you create these strings, almost like pearls on a thread of consciousness and awareness. And you can kind of hopscotch back and forth in these moments of presence that you create. Like rather than just mindlessly blazing through your day, if you just take a second to like make a little ceremony out of whatever it is that you're doing, I feel like that affords an opportunity to tap into this like timeless place, these like portals, you know?
Definitely, yeah. I think,
bless this kale. It's like, jeez, but you know what I mean. I should have said something else, like bless this beer or something a little less on brand. I don't know.
No, I get you. I mean, I like kale too. You know, no harm in eating some kale. Yeah, no, I mean, I asked that question just because, yeah, you know, I think a lot of times people either get lost in either or the past, thinking about how they failed or where they went wrong or something they said wrong to someone or whatever. There's a myriad of different things that you could run through your mind, or in the future of where you want to go. Yeah, things happen, and yeah, or you know, the future where you would like to go with your life and those sort of things. But I think, you know, what you said, yeah, massaging the kale or massaging the beer. I don't know why you would massage a beer, but
massage the beer.
But no, I mean, yeah, I think that's really valid, and yeah. But anyways, so yeah, no, thanks so much for coming on
It was
board.
my pleasure.
Yeah, I really appreciate the exploratory conversation.
Yeah, thanks for exploring this concept of like art and craft and living a life intentionally. It's a beautiful subject you dwell in. I appreciate it. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Music for the podcast is by Rarebit, aka Justin Dosher Hopkins. Editing assistance is by Noah Wainwright, and intern is Sam King.